Hey, welcome back to that 70s Card Show. I'm John Keating. You may or may not know me. And I guess the great thing is I don't even know myself most of the time. I'm ever evolving, ever learning, reluctantly, the evolution part, joyfully the learning part. So often assume that I'm wrong. And sometimes I'm surprised to find out that I am actually right. But that's really not what this is about. No more self-discovery. I'm trying to draw some comparisons between my old days as a rock and roll roadie. I spent 10 years living on a bus, traveling the world, sometimes on aeroplanes, sometimes on trains. And I learned a lot back then. Learned to talk to people, learned to play a role out there in the public, and really learned a lot doing that. Saw some crazy stuff as well. Seen a million faces, and I've rocked probably 12 of them. But anyway, Jackson Brown. Everybody knows that I love me some Jackson Brown. I consider him the greatest American songwriter. You can have your Bob Dylan all you want, but Jackson Brown's right up there. And anyway, that's the great thing about music, and the great thing about card collecting is we have different tastes. We have different likes. We have different ways of enjoying both. The Loadout and Rosie are songs on the wonderfully uh, written and recorded Running on Empty album back in the late 70s. The 70s, if you don't know, was the greatest decade ever. And the Loadout doesn't mean anything unless you kind of know the other part of it, which is the load in. And I look at the old days of my rock and roll excursions and kind of trying to compare them to a card show or the acquisition of a collection, both of which I've been involved with lately. Just got back from Strongsville, Ohio, and had a good time with the people and with the cards. And the load in kind of, I look at that as, hey, there's a show in Strongsville. What's the path to the Strongsville show for each of us as individuals? Same thing when you're loading in some rock and roll equipment into an empty arena after coming from a city previous, and there's an anticipation and a build up. There's a planning and all that stuff, and the build up and anticipation to the show, which is absolutely incredible. And that's the goal, right? So we plan our trip. We have an internal dialogue whether we should go, we should not go, how it will impact the other parts of our lives, how we get there, and all that stuff. My day would begin early in the morning, 7 in the morning, maybe on a rock and roll load in, and take me to probably about 4 o'clock, where I take a sissy nap on the bus, get up, have dinner, and then do a rock and roll show. And kind of like when you're planning this whole thing, uh, right up until the day before, my wife said, "Why are you driving to Strongsville? It's 6+ hours in a big old Jeep, which is not a very comfortable vehicle to drive for that long." And yeah, you're right. So I switched to a flight, used my miles for airfare, used my miles for free days for rental car, and I used my points for hotel room. So great, done all that fun stuff. You get to the show. I had a joy Friday night of walking into a room of absolutely wonderful, uh, wonderful people. They were all men. They happened to be all men. I don't need to tell folks here that it's a male skewed hobby for various reasons. Not agreeing that it should be, but just happens to be that way for the most part. So walk into a room of a bunch of extraordinary gentlemen and from all walks of life, with all sorts of tastes outside of cards, but the commonality, there could have been plumbers and trash truck drivers and circus jugglers and doctors and financial planners and tire changers, all sorts of people, but any kind of pretense of nobility goes out the window when we start talking cards. So, what a wonderful atmosphere in that room that night, Friday night in Strongsville, Ohio, and kind of set the tone for the next day. So, look at that as the opening act, although it was a stellar opening act. And then, of course, the show is the next day. And if you've ever been to a concert, I can tell you from being on the other side of the barricade that when the house lights go out and the crowd goes bonkers, there's an adrenaline rush unlike any other. And hearing that night after night for many years was pretty addicting. And walking into that show, all the cards are there. And at that point you had made the right decision and made the right sacrifices to be there. Not that there's too many sacrifices going to a card show, but it takes a little effort to swim upstream and get there. And it's all worth it. And my MO is to take a lap. For those who ask, I went left and went counterclockwise. I know some people keep track of that stuff. And I'm a loner out there on the card show floor. I like to get around and look at stuff. And I feel like if somebody's with me, then I'm slowing them down or possibly them slowing me down. And because I look at stuff a little bit differently, and we all look at stuff differently, obviously. But anyway, jogging around that ice rink, right decision. There's a buzz. The endorphins are popping. I'm in full bloom, as they say. And it was a wonderful time. Spent a couple hours doing that, bumping into some fellow YouTube subscribers. We're all subscribers. I think that's the best way to equalize everything, is not followers or creators, but we're all subscribers in one way or another. So bunch of subscribers out there, fellow subscribers. What a great time. Go a couple tables and you see somebody and you keep going and somebody yells your name. Again, a new feeling for me, but wonderful. So did a couple hours in there, bought a couple cards, and then I needed break. My friend out there in Nebraska territory will tell you that my people batteries were low, so I got away for a couple hours. Then came back, and I like shows a little later in the day or later in the week, maybe even a Sunday, where the crowd's a little thinner. So late afternoon at Strongsville, what a wonderful time to be on the floor, lots of room, and all that stuff. So anyway, that's that part of it, the show part of it, which whether it's a rock and roll show or a card show, there's a buzz and there's an energy you have to push you through from table to table, from song to song. Jackson Brown sings about the loadout and the emptiness of an empty arena, chairs folding and trusses coming down and going up ramps and all that stuff. There's no bigger letdown for me than there was back in the day when the house lights would come back on and the air was thick and people were going about their lives. The attendees of the concert head back home full of their own little buzz, where that moment in time, as somebody who's working on the show, it's an empty feeling because you have to now make chaos out of order and then get it back in the truck. So you're making chaos out of order and then order out of chaos with a few short hours. So I used to hate loadouts, and I guess it's the same once a show is over. Once you leave a show, you have to take stock and find out what your emotions, where your emotions are and how you feel. And there's a little bit of a letdown, I'm sure. I'm sure many people feel that going from a card show or buying a collection after it's all done, you're kind of bit of a letdown, like I say. Now, before we leave Strongsville, just again, a tremendous amount of people there, and the commonality that the people shared, the cards, the history of sports, even the history of history, non-sport cards, is it's unparalleled. And I ended up buying a couple tobacco cards and a couple other things, and it was just a good time. It wasn't about what I got, because I'm a firm believer that you can pretty much find anything anywhere. I'm lucky enough to have the Philly show, which, truth be told, is a more impressive show than Strongsville, more vintage dealers, bigger show, all that stuff. So, yes, there was a higher percentage of vintage tables at Strongsville, but the Philly show would still blow that away, in my opinion. But my point to that is I can find cards anywhere, but to meet more people for the first time and to meet people multiple times, it's just that's an unmatched um, thing uh, that can't be replicated. So to those who I had a chance to meet and to talk to, as many others have said, there's too many people to mention. But man, having one-on-one conversations and talking to, a couple folks there about music or about cards or about history. I walked around with one chap who I'm not going to name, but he knows who he is, and we just pointed out just different things about cards and card sets, whether it's the '70s tops without helmet logos or the '70s Fleer football without player mentions, uh, but with NFL logos. So a lot of fun things, a lot of information exchanged, and a lot of stuff learned, which is really a great time. And I'm learning more and more that I need to collect more people as well as cards, and this hobby is allowing me to do that. Meet people, kind of latch onto them maybe, and it's not a one night stand. It's a see you down the road, uh, and I'm embracing that more and more each time. So most of the people you find out there on YouTube are how they are on YouTube because people expose themselves and let themselves fly in the wind for everybody to see. Very few of the people who produce and make YouTube videos in our little circle of friends is a good enough actor or actress that they're hiding their true selves. So the people are who the people are, which is wonderfully refreshing, especially for somebody like me who's as cynical as can be. It's good to know that the people are actually as they are portrayed on YouTube. Rosie, second part of this. Rosie is a song on Running on Empty album as well. And it's about a girl hanging around the load-in door when the band's crew shows up in the morning. And Rosie is what you would call a groupie. And I'm going to draw the correlation between Rosie and the collection I was involved with recently. Rosie showed up early, hung around, got a free pass to the show, and then Rosie ends up leaving with the drummer. And the guy mixing the sound, the monitor engineer who brought her in, is left empty-handed. Now, with the collection that I was recently involved in, I was not left empty-handed, far from that, but I got to spend some time alone with some incredible cards. And when asked by one of the partners, what cards do I want? And I said, well, of course I want every card, but I know my lane and I know my station. And my station dictates that I get a lot of the cards that nobody else wants, or perhaps do not have a high resale Q rating, maybe. So those cards, spent some time with those cards, old Rosie, and then the drummers came in and took those cards away. And there's a little bit of an emptiness there as well, but that's an emotional hurdle that you have to get over whenever you buy a collection, right? Especially as a collector and not somebody who typically sells um, stuff they don't already have. So I typically do sell stuff, my duplicates, but it's an interesting emotion that I had once it was all done and the cards were gone and it was just me in my basement again. But no hard feelings. I'm just saying it's the emotions you go through are pretty interesting. And when I buy a collection, and I buy many collections, those cards go into my boxes immediately or into my display case, but mostly into those white boxes over my shoulder, and join their other buddies, and they're there forever, and it's great. But it's not often that cards end up going back up the steps unless they're in an envelope or I'm trading in some duplicates for store credit. So interesting emotion to grasp with there. But boy, what an amazing pair of fellows and that I was involved with. Wonderful gentlemen, wonderfully fair gentlemen, and a really fun time to see the history of cards and the history of tobacco cards, gum cards, and even within that, on a more micro level, what Topps was doing in the '60s with a lot of inserts and stuff like that. So fun stuff. Great opportunity and a great experience. And for those who were here to witness it in real time, it was wonderful having you at the house. It was wonderful enjoying it with people on the live stream on YouTube, and of course, we could talk about that forever and ever. It was that much fun. So anyway, no hard feelings. Got over the letdown of both the collection and the Strongsville show, and just again making the hobby. I always thought the hobby was about cards, but it's fun to know that the byproduct or the side effect uh, of meeting people and establishing relationships and practicing my English is ongoing. So, to those who I met in the process of this collection hunt, cheers to you folks. To those who I met in Strongsville, a big thumbs up to you folks, you men who make this such a fun little endeavor that doesn't necessarily have to be enjoyed alone. So, for that, I thank you. And as always, I hope that you folks enjoy collecting and, more importantly, enjoy your dang collection. Cheers, all.